moment, I saw Marcus's hand move toward my wrist. I knew the evening was going to get worse. We were in the main gallery space, Isabella's show opening, the one I'd spent 3 weeks organizing, and Marcus had already had 3 drinks. That was the number. 3 drinks, and he stopped being charming and started being someone I didn't recognize. "You're embarrassing me," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Around us, collectors and artists mingled, completely unaware of the storm moving through the room. "I haven't said anything," I said, stepping back, trying to create space. "Exactly," Marcus said. "You haven't said anything intelligent all night. You've just stood there looking like you don't belong here, like you don't understand what real art is." His hand caught my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to send a message. Hard enough that my heart rate spiked into dangerous territory. "Let go," I said quietly. "You think you're so special because you can paint," he continued, like I hadn't spoken. "You think that makes you an artist. But you're mediocre, Emma. You're beautiful enough that people pretend to like your work, but we all know the truth. You don't have what it takes." My wrist was starting to hurt. I was trying to figure out how to extract myself without causing a scene, without making things worse later. At the apartment, when the room's entire energy shifted. It wasn't loud. There was no announcement, but every person in that gallery felt it. The arrival of someone who changed the balance of power just by existing. I looked up and saw a man standing in the doorway. Tall, dark, the kind of beautiful that suggested danger. He wore an expensive suit like it was armor, and his eyes cataloged everything in a single glance: the layout of the space, the security, the people, and finally me. My wrist in Marcus's hand, my expression, the fear I was trying very hard to hide. His gaze went very still. Marcus felt it too. His hand dropped from my wrist like I'd suddenly turned to fire. "That's him," Marcus whispered, and there was something like fear in his voice. "That's Dante, Dante." The name landed like a stone in still water. The man crossed the gallery without hurrying, and people moved out of his way without being asked. It was the most natural thing in the world, the way crowds reorganize themselves around power. He walked directly to us. "Marcus," he said, and his voice was quiet and absolutely lethal. "I don't remember giving you permission to put your hands on anyone. Ever." "I wasn't," Marcus started. "You were," Dante said. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He was just stating facts. "And that stops now. You leave this gallery. You don't come back. And if I hear that you've put your hands on this woman again, or anyone else, I'll know about it, and we'll have a different conversation." Marcus's face was white. "Yes," he said. "I understand." "Good," Dante said. He turned to me, and I felt something shift in my chest. His eyes were very dark, and they were looking at me like I was the only real thing in the room. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't. I was shaking. I was terrified. I was also bizarrely aroused, which made me hate myself. "I'm Dante Reyes," he said, "and I'm sorry you had to experience that." Then he was turning away, was moving deeper into the gallery, was being approached by Isabella, like she'd been waiting for him to arrive all evening. Marcus touched my wrist one more time, not aggressive, just a reminder, and left. I stood there in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by people talking about art and money and beauty, and realized that something fundamental had just changed. I looked back at Dante across the room. He was already looking at me, and he smiled like he'd just made a promise he fully intended to keep. Marcus was quiet on the drive home, which was worse than if he'd been angry. The quiet meant he was thinking, planning, deciding how to punish me for something I hadn't done. That man, I said, before he could start. He was there on business with Isabella. I don't know who he is. Yes, you do, Marcus said. Everyone who works in this city knows who Dante Reyes is. I don't, I said. Good, Marcus said. And you're going to keep it that way. You're not going to talk to him. You're not going to make eye contact with him. You're not going to do anything that makes him think you're available. I'm not available, I said. I'm with you. Exactly, Marcus said. And I don't need some cartel boss deciding that you'd be useful to him. The word cartel hung in the air like poison. We got back to my apartment, the one I'd rented before Marcus moved in, the small studio in Wynwood that I'd thought was temporary and had become permanent. And Marcus went straight to bed. He fell asleep immediately, which meant the real punishment would come later. The extended guilt, the distance, the way he'd make me feel like I'd nearly destroyed everything. I sat at the small kitchenette and thought about the man's hand on mine. I thought about the way he'd looked at me. I thought about the fact that I'd felt something like alive for the first time in 3 years. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I texted my mother. Not a long text. Just, "Can we talk tomorrow?" She called me back immediately. "Emma, it's 11 p.m., she said. "I know," I said. I kept my voice very quiet so Marcus wouldn't hear from the bedroom. "I just need to hear your voice. What happened?" she asked, and there was something in her voice, something that suggested she already knew something was wrong, had known for a long time. "Nothing," I said. And then, because my mother could hear lies better than anyone, everything. "I don't know. I think I need help figuring things out. I'll come to Miami this weekend," she said. "We'll talk in person." "He won't like that." "I don't care if he likes it," my mother said firmly. "Emma, listen to me. You call me whenever you need to. You text me. You don't wait for permission. Do you understand?" "Okay," I said, and something in my chest unclenched for the first time in days. After I hung up, I felt different. Smaller still, but also like I'd planted a flag somewhere. Like I'd drawn a line that was just mine. It was the smallest act of defiance, but it was mine. Dante came back to the gallery 2 days later. He arrived at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, when Marcus wouldn't be there to pick me up, when the gallery was quiet and empty, except for me and a few collectors browsing. He was looking at the same painting he'd been near when I first saw him, an abstract landscape in shades of blue and gray. I pretended not to notice him for a full minute, but my skin was aware of his presence, the way a compass is aware of north. "The artist is underpriced," I said finally, because I couldn't pretend anymore. He turned, and there was no surprise in his face. He'd been waiting for me to speak. "You think so?" he asked. "I know so," I said. "That piece cost $40,000 to create. The artist is asking for 25. But I don't mention pricing to collectors. That would be crossing a boundary." He smiled. "Whose boundary?" "Marcus's," I said. "He handles the business side. Does he also handle the part where he tells you that your art isn't good enough?" The question landed like a punch. "I don't want to talk about him," I said. "Good," Dante said. "Let's talk about you instead. How long have you been managing this gallery?" 2 years, I said. "And how many of your own paintings have you hung here?" "None," I said. "I'm not good enough. According to Marcus," Dante finished. "I'm going to make a suggestion, and you can reject it. But I want you to actually consider it, not just dismiss it, because someone told you to." "What?" I asked. "Bring me 3 of your paintings," he said. "Not for sale, just for me to look at. If you can't do that, If you're too afraid, then I'll know that Marcus has won completely. He hasn't won, I said, and I surprised myself with the anger in my voice. Then prove it, Dante said. 3 paintings. I'll come back Friday. He left without waiting for an answer, but we both knew I'd bring them. I spent Thursday night finding the paintings. 3 canvases I'd hidden in the back of my studio closet, the ones I'd painted when Marcus wasn't home, the ones that made me feel something true. One was water and light, the way I saw it. One was a portrait of my mother when she was young. One was abstract rage, all sharp colors and violent brushstrokes. They were good. I'd been trying not to know that, trying not to believe it, but standing in my apartment with them laid out on my bed, I couldn't pretend anymore. These paintings had something. They had truth. Then I did the research. I Googled Dante Reyes, and my stomach dropped when I found the articles. Dante Reyes, age 36. Several news articles from business publications about legitimate import-export operations, shipping companies, real estate investments. Nothing that screamed dangerous. But then I found something else, a news article from 2 years ago. A cartel-related shooting outside a Miami nightclub. And there, in a grainy photograph taken from across the street, was Dante, standing next to a man in a suit, talking to police. The caption read, "Reyes reportedly witnessed the incident." I read the article 3 times, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Witnessed. That was one way to put it. I tried to research more, but anything specific seemed to disappear into the void. No social media. No detailed history. Just a man who existed in the gaps between public records. That night, Marcus asked about the paintings. "Why are you looking at canvases?" He asked casual, but I could hear the calculation underneath. "Just organizing," I said, which was a lie. He didn't push it, which meant he'd be watching closer now. Friday afternoon, I brought the paintings to the gallery. I hung them in the storage room, not on display, just leaning against the wall where Dante could see them if he came looking. I was terrified and exhilarated, and more afraid than I'd been since the opening. When Dante arrived at 4 p.m., I led him directly to the back. He studied the first painting for a long time without speaking. Then the second, then the third. "You painted these?" he asked finally. "Yes. They're excellent," he said. "Not good, excellent. There's truth in them. Raw, honest truth. Marcus says." "I know what Marcus says," Dante said. "And Marcus is a liar. These paintings deserve to be seen. They deserve to sell for more than 40,000. They deserve recognition." "I can't hang them," I said. "Not here." He wouldn't allow it. "Okay," Dante said. And so I told Marcus I was meeting my mother on Saturday. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was planning to text her afterward. But that morning, when he asked where I was going, I said, "Brunch with my mom. She's driving down." He didn't question it, which meant he had something else going on, something important enough that he wasn't paying attention to me. The private showing was in a small gallery space in Wynwood, a raw, beautiful place with exposed brick and skylights. There were exactly 18 people there, collectors, a few artists, Isabella and Dante. My paintings hung on the north wall. Seeing them displayed, really displayed, not hidden, made me feel like I was walking through a dream, like I was watching someone else's life happen. A woman approached me within the first hour. "These paintings," she said, pointing to the water and light piece. "How much?" My mouth went dry. Nobody had ever asked me that before. I started. 35,000, Dante said from behind me. like it was the most natural thing in the world to answer for me. "Sold," the woman said. "Can you deliver?" I nodded, still not quite believing it was happening. By the end of the showing, I'd sold 2 paintings. $20,000 in my pocket. $20,000 that was mine. When everyone left, Dante and I stood alone in the gallery. "What you did," he said. "Coming here today, showing your work, accepting your own value, that was brave." I lied to him, I said. "Yes," Dante said. "You did, and you survived it. What if he finds out?" "Then you'll have to make a choice," Dante said, "about whether you want to keep lying or whether you want to keep living." He touched my face, just barely, with the back of his hand. "Not today, though," he said. "Today, you just get to feel what it's like to be proud of yourself." Marcus found out on Sunday. Someone from the gallery world mentioned the showing to him at a nightclub. Someone saw my paintings and asked who Emma Richardson was, and Marcus realized that I'd lied to him, that I'd built something without his permission. He didn't yell when he got home. That's what scared me most. He was quiet and controlled, sitting on the bed while I stood in the doorway of my apartment, my space that had become our space, that had become his space. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt like it was mine. "Tell me about the paintings," he said. "I showed them," I said, "at a private showing with Dante Reyes." Yes, something shifted in Marcus's face. Not anger exactly, but something worse, something like disappointment, which somehow hurt more. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked. "Do you understand what it means to associate with someone like him?" "I don't care," I heard myself say, and the words felt like they were coming from someone else. Someone braver than me. "You care," Marcus said, "because if you don't, I'll make you care. You think you sold 2 paintings. You think that means you're independent. You have no idea how dependent you are on me, Emma. I've been funding your entire life. This apartment, your gallery salary, I got you that job. Everything you have, I gave you. So you own me," I said. "No," Marcus said, "but I can destroy you. I can make sure you never work in the art world again. I can make sure everyone knows that you're difficult, unstable, ungrateful. I can ensure that those paintings you just sold are worth nothing, because no serious collector will touch your work after I'm done with you." He stood up. "You're going to call Dante Reyes," Marcus said. "You're going to tell him that you can't see him anymore. You're going to tell him that this was a mistake. And then you're going to apologize to me. I should have done it, should have capitulated, should have made myself small again and accepted the punishment. Instead, I said, 'No, no,'" he repeated, like he couldn't possibly have heard me correctly. "No," I said again, and my hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "I'm not calling him. I'm not apologizing, and I want you to leave." For a moment, Marcus just stared at me. Then he started to laugh. "You think you can do this?" he asked. "You think you can reject me? Do you know who you're protecting? Do you know what Dante Reyes actually is?" "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "I care what he is to me, and I don't care what you think about that anymore." "Then I guess we're done here," Marcus said. He threw some clothes in a bag and left. I stood in my apartment again, suddenly, completely, and realized that I'd just made a choice that might destroy me, or might save me. I wouldn't know which until tomorrow. I called Dante from my apartment that night. "Marcus left," I said without preamble. "Tell me what happened," he said, and his voice was calm in a way that suggested he'd been expecting this. I told him everything. The paintings, the lie, Marcus's reaction, my refusal. When I finished, there was a long silence. "You need to understand something," Dante said finally. Marcus works for me, or more precisely, he works for someone who works for me. And by rejecting him, by standing up to him, you've created a situation that my organization is going to take very seriously. What does that mean? I asked. It means that Marcus is going to try to prove that he's still valuable, Dante said. It means he's going to do something reckless. And it means that your parents, your friends, anyone you care about, they all become potential leverage. You're threatening me, I said. No, Dante said. I'm warning you. And then I'm going to protect you. But protection comes with a cost. You're going to have to trust me completely, even when it doesn't make sense. Can you do that? I don't know, I said honestly. Good, Dante said. Because if you said yes immediately, I wouldn't believe you. Think about it. Call me tomorrow. He hung up, and I sat in my apartment in the dark, understanding that I'd moved from one dangerous situation into another. The only difference was that this time, I'd chosen it. By morning, guards were positioned around my parents' house in Jacksonville. They were subtle, just people who happened to be in the neighborhood, who happened to be watching the street. My parents didn't know they were there. I didn't tell them, but they were there. My mother called me that afternoon. Something's wrong, she said. Tell me. So I did. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she said, Are you safe? I think so, I said. And this man, Dante, do you trust him? I don't know, I said, but I trust myself less than I used to. So I'm going with his judgment. My mother laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in years. That's the smartest thing I've heard you say in 3 years, she said. Stay in Miami. Let him protect you. But Emma, the moment something feels wrong, you call me. Do you understand? Yes, I said. That evening, Dante came at the safe house. I started to understand what Dante actually was. There were meetings, people coming and going, phone calls about shipments and operations and money. Carlos, his lieutenant, came by twice a day with reports. I tried not to listen, but it was impossible not to understand that I was living in the middle of a cartel operation. That every comfort I had, the food, the security, the clothes, was paid for by violence and crime. Dante and I didn't talk about it. Instead, we talked about art. He'd bring me books on artists and movements. We'd discuss composition and light, and the way certain painters captured truth in ways that words couldn't. But underneath every conversation, there was the shadow of what he was, what I'd chosen to protect myself with. On the third night, Carlos came to see me without Dante. The boss has lost his edge, he said, standing in the doorway of my room. And do you know what happens to people in this organization who lose their edge? He's protecting me, I said. Exactly, Carlos said. He's soft. He cares about you. And softness gets people killed. Then he left, and I understood that I wasn't just in danger anymore. I was dangerous. Chapter 10. The decision, 48 HORS. We have 48 hours, Dante said. We were on the terrace of the safe house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful and wrong, and I'd started to hate beautiful things. 48 hours until what? I asked. Until Marcus moves against us, Dante said. He's contacted a rival cartel faction. He's offering them information about my operation in exchange for power. They're moving into Miami territory tonight. We have until Tuesday night to secure things. What does that mean? I asked. What do you have to do? Things that will remind my organization that I'm not soft, Dante said. Things that will cost something. Your soul? I asked. Probably, he said. He was quiet for a moment. I'm going to accelerate my plan to step back, he continued. I'm going to transfer power to Carlos and a few trusted people. I'm going to move money into legitimate operations. And I'm going to prepare to turn myself in. What? I said. The only way you survive this, Dante said, is if I'm not running the cartel anymore. Because as long as I am, you're leverage. You're a weakness. And eventually, someone will use you. So you're just leaving? I asked. I'm choosing to face what I've done, he said, and I'm choosing to do it with you in mind. Instead of doing it 10 years from now, when I'm too old to have a life afterward. The sun disappeared below the horizon. I need you to know something, Dante said. In the next 48 hours, things are going to get worse before they get better. I'm going to have to do things that scare you. And I need you to trust that I'm doing them for a reason. Okay, I said, even though I wasn't sure I meant it. Marcus moved at midnight. The rival cartel faction he'd contacted made their move simultaneously, hitting 3 of Dante's operations at the port, disrupting a supply line, and making it clear that they were challenging his authority. Everything escalated in hours. Dante was everywhere. Phone calls, meetings, orders issued with cold precision. I watched him become someone I didn't recognize, the cartel boss completely, without any of the softness I'd seen before. By 6 a.m., the situation was still contained, but barely. We have 36 hours, Carlos said, checking his watch, before the next shipment arrives. If we don't demonstrate control by then, we lose Miami. I was moved to a different safe house, more secure, more like a prison. Dante came to see me for 5 minutes. I'm sorry, he said. This will be over soon. Will you be alive when it's over? I asked. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Dante came back to the safe house covered in blood. Not his blood, but blood nonetheless. It's done, he said. He didn't ask if I wanted to know. He just told me. I killed Marcus's contact to the rival cartel. I made sure there was no question about whose territory this is. I made sure everyone understood that I will not tolerate threats to you. I looked at him, at the blood, at the exhaustion, at the man I was in love with who'd just done something terrible. I'm sorry, he said. I know I said I wanted to be different, but sometimes the only way to protect people is to do the thing you hate most. I reached out and took his hand, blood and all. Go clean up, I said, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. With the crisis over, Dante moved faster than I'd thought possible. He brought in accountants and lawyers. He started transferring operations to Carlos and a few trusted people. He moved millions of dollars into legitimate channels, and he began dismantling his own power. It was brutal to watch. Every piece of the empire he'd built, he was systematically destroying or handing off to someone else. Every connection he had, he was severing or making dependent on his successors. I've been planning this for years, he told me one night. We were in the glass house, looking out at the Miami skyline, waiting for the right time, waiting for the right reason. And then you happened, and suddenly the right time was now. You're doing this for me, I said. I'm doing this for me, he corrected. You just made me willing to do it. He showed me the gallery plans again. We started refining them. We talked about which artists to feature, how to make the space feel both sophisticated and accessible. Marcus didn't die in Miami like I'd thought. He resurfaced in a different cartel, working for a faction that saw opportunity in Dante's transition. He came back to Miami not broken, but strategic. He went directly to the federal prosecutors. He offered them information, not just about Dante, but about the entire organization. He offered to be their witness, their insider, their proof that the cartel infrastructure was compromised. The prosecutors took him seriously. And then Dante found out. He called me from somewhere I couldn't quite identify. "I'm going to turn myself in," he said, "before they come for me, before they use you as leverage, before this gets any worse." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said, "that I'm going to cooperate. I'm going to testify about everything. I'm going to give them enough information to dismantle what's left of the organization, and I'm going to face the consequences." "How long?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Probably 8 to 10 years if I'm cooperative. But Emma, I need you to know that I chose this. I chose to face what I've done instead of letting it destroy everything." "Okay," I said, and I meant it. "We'll survive it. You'll have to testify," he said, "against Marcus. About what he did to you, what he threatened. It will be difficult." "I know," I said, "but I'll do it." 8 years later, Dante had been released after serving his full sentence, reduced slightly for cooperation, but substantial enough that he'd paid for what he'd done. Marcus was still in prison, having fought every aspect of his conviction. The gallery was opening tonight. Richardson and Ray's, the sign above the door read, "My father's name, Dante's name, united." It was the most beautiful space I'd ever seen. White walls, natural light, art that made people stop and think instead of just look. The opening exhibition featured 15 of my paintings, the ones I'd created in the 8 years while Dante was away, the ones that told the story of waiting, loving someone from a distance, believing in redemption. My parents were here. My mother had her arm linked through my father's, and they were both looking at my paintings like they'd never seen my work before. Dante stood across the room, talking to collectors, but his eyes kept finding mine. When things quieted down, he came over and handed me a glass of champagne. "You did this," he said. "You made this possible. You believed in it when I couldn't. You did it," I said. "You chose to change." "We did it," he said, "together." And as I looked around the gallery, at my paintings on the walls, at people who were genuinely interested in art instead of just investment, at a space that was beautiful and clean and free, I understood something my father had tried to teach me my whole life. Integrity is the only currency that matters. And sometimes redemption is the highest price you can pay. 2 years later, the gallery was a success. Not famous, not in the way that Dante's cartel had been infamous, but respected, important, a place where emerging artists could get their start. I had 3 paintings in a major Miami museum now. I'd stopped thinking of myself as a woman with potential and started thinking of myself as an artist. The difference was subtle but profound. Dante had started teaching business ethics at a local university. It seemed fitting somehow, a man who'd lived outside ethics, now teaching people the importance of integrity. We were married on a beach at sunset, just my parents and his few trusted friends. No ceremony, no performance, just a commitment, made simply and clearly. The glass house was still ours, but we'd started talking about buying a smaller place, something with a studio for me, something that felt like home instead of like a monument to power. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked him one night. We were on the terrace, overlooking the water, and the sunset was doing that thing that made the sky look like a painting. "Giving up the cartel?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "The power, the control, the years in prison." He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said finally, "because every time I look at you, Every time I see you painting, every time I walk into that gallery and see something beautiful that came from your vision, I understand that I got the better deal. Even though you lost everything, I didn't lose everything, he said. I lost the things that were destroying me, and I gained a life where I get to wake up next to someone I love, doing work that matters. That's not a loss. That's redemption. I leaned into him, and we watched the sun disappear into the ocean. The story we'd lived through the cartel, the danger, the choices and consequences, didn't get to say goodbye the way people imagine goodbye should happen. No long kiss in the rain. No dramatic last night. No promise spoken into someone's mouth like it could keep them safe. I got a knock at my studio door at 2:14 a.m., not the polite kind. The kind that said, "We're not asking." When I opened it, there were two men in plain clothes, and a woman with her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Emma Richardson?" the woman asked. My throat went dry. "Yes, I'm Deputy Marshal Alvarez," she said. "We need you to come with us. Now." I looked over my shoulder at my studio, the half-finished canvas, the paint on the floor, the life I'd tried to build in a room too small to hold my fear. "Is this about?" "It's about your safety," she cut in. "Pack a bag, 10 minutes. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I didn't do any of the things I used to do when Marcus cornered me. And I tried to find the least dangerous path. I grabbed jeans, a sweatshirt, my passport, and the one painting I couldn't leave behind, the one I'd started the night Dante first looked at me like I mattered. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt different. Charged, like the city itself knew something was coming. Alvarez walked me down the stairs instead of letting me take the elevator. "Is Dante?" I started. She didn't answer directly, which was an answer. "We're moving you," she said. "Temporary safe location. No phone, no social media, no contact with anyone except counsel. My parents, you can request contact later. And Isabella." Alvarez's mouth tightened. "Especially not Isabella." That made my stomach drop. They put me in the back of an unmarked SUV. The windows were tinted, so dark the world looked like it was underwater. As we drove, my burner phone, my last thin thread to the life I recognized, buzzed in my pocket. One text, unknown number. "You don't know who you're playing with." I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then the signal died, and the city disappeared behind us. The safe house wasn't what I expected. I expected something bleak. Concrete, a room that smelled like government and stale coffee. Instead, it was a small rental house with clean furniture and no personality. Like someone had stripped it of anything that could be used against you, including comfort. Alvarez took my phone. "Please don't," I said automatically, like she was Marcus, and I was still the version of myself that begged. Alvarez looked at me for a beat. Then she softened, just slightly. "You can have it back when this is over," she said. "When it's safe." When will it be safe? Her silence answered that too. A man in a suit arrived an hour later. He introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Klein, like he thought my life was something you could solve with a business card. He sat at the kitchen table and opened a folder. "Emma," he said, "Dante Reyes has requested a proffer." My heart stumbled. "A what?" A formal cooperation session," he said. "He's offering information on his organization, allied factions, laundering routes, violence, corruption, all of it. And Marcus," I said, because my body remembered his hand on my wrist like a scar. "Yes," Klein said, "and Marcus." He slid a document toward me. It wasn't a contract. It was a reality. "We need your statement," he said. "We need your testimony. You're not just a victim. You're a witness to the pattern, the control, the threats, the connection to Ray's." "I wasn't connected to him," I said quickly. Klein watched my face the way men like him do, like they're trained to see what you don't want to admit. "You were," he said, "even if you didn't choose it." I swallowed. "What happens to Dante?" Klein's expression didn't change. "He'll go to prison," he said. "Cooperation reduces exposure, but it doesn't erase the crime." "How long?" 8 to 10 years, he said, echoing Dante's words like they were already written. The air felt too thin. "And what happens to me?" I asked. Klein leaned in slightly. "That depends," he said, "on whether the people around Ray's decide your leverage." Alvarez from the counter said quietly, "And they might." I stared at the folder, at the neat paperwork that contained my fear in official language. Then my gaze landed on a line near the bottom. Threat assessment. High. Retaliation potential. Significant. My hands started shaking. Not because I didn't understand, because I did. And for the first time, my choices weren't about surviving Marcus's moods. They were about surviving a war. They gave me a new phone 2 days later. Not a real one. A government one. A phone that could call exactly 3 numbers and made me feel like my life had been reduced to a flow chart. Alvarez stood beside me while I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Emma." Hearing her voice did something to me. It cracked something I'd been holding together with pure stubbornness. "Mom," I said, and my voice broke. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Where are you?" "I can't," I started. "Is it him?" she asked. "Is it Marcus?" I closed my eyes. Yes. My mother's voice went cold in a way I'd never heard. "I'm coming," she said. "You can't." "I'm coming," she repeated, like she was daring the universe to stop her. I didn't tell her about Dante. I didn't tell her about the cartel. I couldn't fit that kind of truth into words without choking on it. When I hung up, Alvarez nodded once, like she approved of something. "What about Isabella?" I asked. Alvarez's expression tightened again. 3 days later, Klein came back. He looked tired, like he'd been awake inside other people's nightmares. "He wants to see you," he said. My heart stopped. "Dante." Klein nodded. "One supervised meeting," he said, "before he surrenders, before we move forward." Alvarez stepped in immediately. "No," she said. "It's too risky." Klein's jaw tightened. "He's insisting," he said. "And frankly, so am I. If Reyes is going to cooperate, we keep him stable, focused, motivated. This isn't charity, it's strategy." I felt like I couldn't breathe. They drove me to a place that looked like nothing, an empty office building. Dark windows, no sign. Inside, everything was clean and silent. They led me down a hallway and opened a door. Dante was standing by the window. No suit, just a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, like he'd finally stopped performing power and was wearing something closer to truth. He turned when he heard me, and for a second, the room became too small for what I felt. "Emma," he said. My eyes burned. I didn't move closer. I didn't touch him. I didn't trust myself. "You're really doing it," I whispered. "Yes," he said. His gaze held mine. Calm, steady. The kind of calm that made you believe he'd already accepted the pain. "I didn't want you to hear it from the news," he said. "Or from him." "Marcus," I said, and the name tasted like blood. Dante's jaw flexed. "He thinks he's smart," he said quietly. "He thinks he can sell the government a story where he's the hero and I'm the monster." "You are a monster," I said before I could stop myself. Dante didn't flinch. I know, he said. That's why I'm doing this. The silence between us was thick. Then Dante reached into his pocket and placed a folded sheet of paper on the table. The gallery lease, he said. Draft. It's in your name, not mine. My throat tightened. You're giving me a future, I whispered. I'm giving you a choice, he corrected. You build it or you don't. You wait or you don't. You live your life or you don't. And you? I asked. Dante's eyes went dark. I'll pay, he said. And if I'm lucky, I'll come back to something worth paying for. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. What if they kill you? I whispered. Dante stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his heat, but not close enough to touch. Then promise me, he said. You'll still build it. My breath caught. I promise, I said. Dante's gaze dropped to my mouth for half a second, like he wanted to kiss me into memory. Then the door opened. Alvarez's voice. Time. Dante didn't move. He just looked at me and said, so softly it felt like a prayer, don't let him rewrite what happened to you. And then I was being walked out of the room before I could answer. The news called it an arrest. That's what it looked like. Flashing lights, cameras, a man in handcuffs. But I knew better. This was a surrender. Dante walked down the courthouse steps in a simple suit, cuffs on his wrists. Head held high like humiliation couldn't touch him. The crowd was chaos. Reporters shouting questions, photographers snapping pictures like they were trying to capture his soul through a lens. Alvarez kept me back, tucked behind a column with 2 agents on either side. Do not move, she said. Do not react. I watched Dante. He didn't look frightened. He looked resolved, like he'd turned his life into a weapon and was finally aiming it at something other than control. Then I saw Marcus. He was half hidden behind a reporter, but I recognized him instantly. The way he stood, the way his eyes hunted. He wasn't afraid of Dante anymore. He thought he'd won. Marcus's gaze flicked toward me, and he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, I can still touch you. My stomach twisted. Dante's head turned slightly, like he felt something shift. His eyes found mine across the chaos. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to understand. He was watching me even now. Even in cuffs. Even with the world taking pictures of his fall. Then agents pulled him forward. As they guided him toward the doors, Marcus stepped closer, bold now. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. He leaned in just enough to make my skin crawl and whispered, He's going away. And you're going to be alone again. Alvarez's hand tightened on my arm. Marcus stepped back into the crowd like he'd never been there, and the courthouse doors swallowed Dante Reyes. Giving a statement sounds simple until you're sitting under fluorescent lights with a recorder on the table and a stranger asking you to translate your pain into facts. How often did he grab you? Klein asked. My mouth went dry. I stared at the wall behind him because looking at his face made it feel too real. Enough, I said. That's not an answer, Klein said gently. I laughed once, sharp, humorless. It was always enough, I said. It was never not enough. Klein nodded and kept going. What did Marcus say about Dante Reyes? That he was dangerous, I said. That I wasn't allowed to look at him. That he would decide I was useful. And did you look at him? I swallowed. Yes. Klein's pen paused. Why? Because for 1 second I felt seen. I didn't say that. I said, because he stopped Marcus. And Klein nodded like he understood the part I didn't say. Then the questions shifted. Did Dante ever threaten you? No. Did he ever ask you for anything? No. Did he ever give you money? No, but he gave me a choice. He gave me air. He gave me the idea that a life could be clean. Klein didn't ask about those things. That wasn't how the government measured truth. After the statement, I walked outside into the parking lot, and the sun felt too bright, like the world was pretending it was normal. Alvarez handed me a bottle of water. "You did good," she said. "I feel sick," I admitted. "That's normal," she said. Then her phone rang. She listened, her expression tightening with each second. When she hung up, she looked at me differently, like she was seeing me as a target instead of a witness. "What?" I asked. Alvarez didn't soften this time. "They found your mother's hotel," she said. My blood went cold. "I told her not to come. She came," Alvarez said. "And now we have to move her too." My mouth went numb. "Move her where?" Alvarez's eyes held mine. "Somewhere safe," she said, "before they decide she's leverage." They moved my mother into a separate safe location. They didn't tell me where. And the cruelty of that, of protecting someone by separating you from them, was a lesson I hadn't expected to learn. Trial prep started a week later. Klein brought me into a courtroom when it was empty, just to show me where I'd sit. Witness stand, defense table, jury box. It looked like a stage built for pain. "They'll try to discredit you," Klein warned. "They'll suggest you're lying, or unstable, or that you were involved with Ray's." "I wasn't," I said. Klein's eyes were kind, but realistic. "They don't need it to be true," he said. "They need the jury to wonder." I closed my eyes, and for a second I was back in my studio, Marcus telling me my reality was wrong, until I doubted my own memory. I forced my eyes open. "How do I stop that?" I asked. Klein leaned forward. "You tell the truth." The first time I saw Marcus in court, I felt my body do something I hated. It froze. He sat at the defense table in a crisp suit, hair cut clean, face calm, like he wasn't the same man who'd made my apartment feel like a cage. He looked reasonable. That was his weapon. He looked like the kind of man people believed. When they called my name, my knees went weak. I walked to the stand anyway. I raised my right hand. I swore to tell the truth, and Marcus watched me like he was waiting for me to crack. Klein's questions were gentle, structured, like he was building a bridge out of my story. He led me through the gallery night, through Marcus's hand on my wrist, through the quiet threats and the punishment that came afterward. I told the jury about the way Marcus would isolate me, the way he'd move into my studio and call it ours, like ownership was love. I told them how small I became, and then the defense stood. Marcus's lawyer approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Richardson," he said smoothly, "you expect this jury to believe that you, an adult woman, stayed with a man you claim was abusive until a cartel boss happened to notice you." My stomach twisted. He let the words hang in the air like bait. "What I expect," I said carefully, "is that they understand how abuse works." He tilted his head. "Or is it possible," he continued, "that you were unhappy and you saw an opportunity, that you wanted Ray's attention, that you wanted power?" I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I looked at the jury. Then I looked at Marcus, and I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "What I wanted was to stop being afraid in my own home." Marcus's lawyer smiled like I'd stepped into his trap. "And yet," he said, "you continued seeing Ray's." I swallowed. "We didn't." He cut me off. "You benefited," he said. "Protection, money, access." "I didn't take money," I snapped. "Then why?" he asked softly. "Did you protect him?" The courtroom went quiet. My breath caught. And Marcus's lawyer said the line like he'd been saving it. "Ms. Richardson, where were you the night the money disappeared?" I didn't know what he meant. Not at first. Then Klein stood and objected so fast his chair scraped the floor. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Counsel, approach. The three of them leaned in and whispered like my life was a secret they were negotiating. I sat on the stand with my pulse screaming. When they pulled back, the judge's eyes were hard. Ms. Richardson, she said, you will answer only the questions asked, and only within the scope allowed. Marcus's lawyer smiled at me like he'd just placed a knife on the table. Klein redirected. He pulled the story back into place. He gave me oxygen again. But the damage was done. They planted a question in the room. Did she help? Did she know? Is she lying? When I stepped down from the stand, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Alvarez guided me toward a side exit. Head down, she murmured. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with cameras and sound. Then everything happened at once. A shout, a surge, a sharp crack that didn't sound like fireworks. People screamed and dropped. Alvarez shoved me behind a concrete barrier so hard my shoulder hit stone. For half a second, time slowed. I saw Marcus across the plaza, eyes wide, confusion on his face, like he couldn't believe danger was allowed to touch him. Then agents swarmed him, not to protect him, to contain him, because the bullet hadn't been for me. It had been for him. The next moment, the chaos moved away, the crowd scattering, and I was left trembling behind the barrier with Alvarez's hand on my neck, checking for blood. You're fine, she said, you're fine. My ears rang. Across the plaza, Marcus was being shoved into a vehicle, face pale, fury burning through his composure. He caught my eye for 1 second, and even now, even after someone tried to kill him, his expression said, "This is still your fault." Alvarez pushed me into the car. As the door slammed, she said the words that made my stomach drop all over again. That wasn't random. The verdict came 3 days later. I didn't sit in the gallery seats. I sat in a back room with Alvarez and a paper cup of water I didn't drink. Klein came in with eyes that looked older than when this started. "It's done," he said. My heart stopped. "Which way?" I whispered. Klein exhaled. "Marcus is convicted," he said. "All major counts." My lungs emptied so fast I almost sobbed. "He's going to prison," Klein added. "A long time." Alvarez nodded like she'd expected nothing less. And yet, even with relief flooding through me, something else rose up too, something bitter. Because justice doesn't erase what happened. It just names it. Klein sat across from me. "Dante's sentencing is next," he said. My chest tightened. "How long?" I asked. Klein hesitated. "He'll get credit for cooperation," he said. "But he's still Dante Reyes. The judge will want to make an example." 8 years, I whispered. "Likely," he said. "Possibly more, possibly less. It depends." I stared at my hands that used to paint, my hands that shook now. Klein leaned forward. "He asked me to tell you something," he said. My head snapped up. "What?" Klein's voice softened. He said, "Tell Emma to stop waiting for permission. Build it." My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Then Alvarez's phone rang. She listened. Her face changed. When she hung up, she looked at me with a kind of grim respect. "They picked up chatter," she said. "The faction that took a shot at Marcus." My blood went cold. "They're angry," Alvarez continued, "because Dante is cooperating." "What does that mean?" I whispered. Alvarez didn't blink. "It means," she said, "the war isn't over just because the verdict is." The courtroom was packed on sentencing day. Not with art people, with press, with agents. with men in suits who watched like hawks. Dante walked in wearing jail clothes that somehow still couldn't make him look small. He was in cuffs. He looked calm, like he'd already made peace with losing everything that used to define him. When his eyes found mine, my breath caught. He didn't smile. He just looked at me like I was real, like I was something worth returning to. The judge spoke for a long time about harm, about consequence, about the difference between power and integrity. Then Dante stood. He didn't plead innocence. He didn't perform regret. He said, simply, "I built an empire out of fear," he told the court, "and I'm dismantling it out of responsibility." He glanced at the prosecutor. "I'm not asking for mercy," he said. "I'm asking for the chance to pay." My eyes burned. When the judge read the sentence, time stopped. 8 years, she said. My heart cracked. Dante didn't flinch. He just nodded once, like he'd expected nothing else. As the court adjourned, agents moved fast. They guided him out like he was already a memory. I stood before I could stop myself. "Dante," I called. He turned just enough to look at me. Alvarez moved to stop me, but Klein held up a hand. Dante's gaze pinned mine. Then, in a voice so low it felt like it belonged only to me, he said, "Check the envelope." "What envelope?" I whispered, but he was already being pulled away. Cuffs clinking, footsteps fading, and in my pocket I realized there was a folded piece of paper I didn't remember receiving. The envelope wasn't dramatic. No wax seal, no flourish. Just my name, handwritten in ink that looked like it had been pressed into the paper with intention. Emma. Inside was a key, a cheap metal key on a plain ring, and a note in Dante's tight, controlled handwriting. Winwood, warehouse on 22nd. Don't bring anyone. Don't wait. Alvarez didn't want to let me go. Klein argued. I stood in the middle of the safe house kitchen and realized something I hadn't realized in a long time. I could choose, not because I was safe, because I was done being owned by fear. So I went. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside.